traders, this is Day Trader Matt with a businesswithtrading.com doing an Emini Trading Room recap for Wednesday the 1st of May. Happy 1st of May everyone. The market today did open up a little lower on some bad ADP data, employment data, and eventually after chopping around a little bit sold off a little more, and then eventually moved sideways. Basically bought up a little bit, but basically moved sideways into the 12 o'clock time frame. Today we took our first trade right here. We took it around at 775, exited at 875, and you see price did go up a little more and then turned back over. It came up one more time, came down, and we took a short at 875, which was right about here. When it came back up, that's when we got short, and we held it into 575, which actually is right here. So that gave us two trades. We traded one contract per trade. Usually I trade two contracts. Today it was, the first trade was definitely better with one contract. I was looking for, something a little different and wanted to be a little more conservative. This second one, I was thinking, perhaps we could come up a little more. The market never did so, and it just rolled over. So, we were happy being short one. Taking 3 points was always a good thing. But, it came down a little more. It did eventually find support, but it did get very choppy, and it just moved sideways for a good hour. So, we're happy 4 points with two trades. Definitely not too bad at all. We'll take the money and come back tomorrow, and we'll play again. And that's really the goal. You want to make consistent profits, and that way when you do have that bad day and you take a little loss, it's not going to hurt you, because you've been taking that consistent profit, and you're able to do that. That's really my whole style. I take a minimal amount of trades, make a little money, but it gives me that opportunity to cherry pick my best trades. And I think that really separates me from a lot of other traders. I've met traders who like to take a lot of trades, and they might take 5 trades, and 3 are winners, 2 are losers. They might make a little bit of money, and commission's going to eat up a lot of that because they've made so many trades. I made 2 trades today. We basically traded 2 contracts, which is nothing with commission. And we made 4 points, which 4 points is $200, and then minus commission, you're probably looking at like 189 or something like that. Well, actually a little more than that, 192 change, something like that. So not too bad at all, actually. And that really for 2.5 hours, $190. We'll round down $190. It might seem little to some people. It might seem like good money to other people, and it really just depends on where you're coming from, and where you're at in your life. And the way that I teach, I teach 2 contracts, and once you do get the hang of the system, you can add 4 contracts, 6 contracts, and it really just depends on where you're at in your life. If you have the money for the account, I always tell people, start small, learn the system, and once you learn it, you can add contracts to it. So 4 points, let's say you trade double the contracts that I trade. You would have had 8 points today. I traded 1 contract per per trade. So if you would have traded 2 contracts per trade, you would have made 8 points. And you could always double that, and that's you can always do that, and that's not changing anything at all. That's just adding contracts. And that's definitely doable. You know, it just it takes a little while to learn. No one has ever come into trading and just been a professional, successful trader from day one. It just doesn't happen. You have to get in there, you have to work, you have to get the experience in. Just like uh, professional sports. We'll take baseball for an example. You don't become a major league baseball player when you're born. You have to work at it. You have to work really hard. You play when you're little. As you're growing up, you move up in your ranks. You probably start at T-ball and move up, play in high school, play in college, and ultimately you'd want to get drafted to a major league team in college. But sometimes you have to go minor league and then work your way up from there. So it's definitely a process. And trading, it's not going to take you 20 years to become a professional trader, but it is going to take you longer than 20 minutes, and it's going to take longer than 20 days. And you're going to have to put in work. It's going to take work, dedication. You have to have passion. If you don't have a passion for trading, you're probably going to give up at some point, because it is difficult. You know, for me, I say it is a little bit easy. But I have to stay humble. And I can't go around telling people that I'm a trader. I don't usually tell people I'm a trader if they ask me what I do. But getting that cocky attitude and all that definitely will hinder the process. You have to be open-minded, I think, when you come into trading, and but it is very enjoyable for me, and it is really rewarding. I trade for 2.5 hours, and after that, I can choose to do something else. I can go have fun. Play guitar, go to the beach, go hang out with some friends. Whatever I want to do, I can do, and it's definitely given me an awesome lifestyle. You can make the money that a doctor would make, or a brain surgeon would make, with a whole lot less hours. And that's very, very exciting to a lot of people. But you do have to have the dedication that, say, a brain surgeon or a doctor would have, towards trading. You really do have to have that, and then you have to have that passion. So, just felt like talking about that a little bit, getting a few questions about, the course and whatnot, and I think those are definitely some prerequisites. It's something that you really need to have, or you need to know that you do need to apply yourself. I can give you some tools. I can show you things that I do, but unless you apply them, it's not going to happen. So it's definitely something that you would need to do. And trading is not cut out for your. Trading is not for everyone. Um, but people aren't born to be traders. Trading is a skill that you develop, just like anything else is a skill that you would develop over time. So, definitely, just felt like talking about that a little bit. Hopefully, you got something out of what I was talking about. I feel it's an important topic. You can always leave comments below if you want. Please, I encourage you to ask questions. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Comment suggestions are definitely welcome. A lot of people like to email me directly, and that's cool. Which, however way you want to communicate, that's the best way. That's what I say. because it doesn't matter. Maybe I prefer you to respond a certain way, but really, who cares what I think? The way that you choose to respond is the best way, and that's the way it always will be. So, anyway, with that, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Have an awesome, awesome night, and I'll see you back here in the markets. Thank you.